Hello, I'm Michaela Robinson. I'm a UAW servicing rep here in Region 9A, and today I'm here with Dr. Maheen Haider, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. And she recently received her PhD in sociology from Boston College, where she was a former Boston College Graduate Employees UAW member. Um, she uses an interdisciplinary approach to understand issues of citizenship and belonging from Muslim immigrant perspectives, and she examines contemporary contexts of high skilled immigration and investigates the complex interplay of intersectional identities emphasized by the political context of the post 9/11 and the War on Terror era. Her research also examines racialized representations of Muslim identities across popular media, contributing to the knowledge of race, ethnicity, and media studies. And we're so excited to have you here today as part of our regional celebration of Ramadan and just hoping to have a really great discussion on what Ramadan means to you. So to start, do you just want to share a little bit more about yourself?
So I'm happy. Thank you so much for having me here today and talking about a topic that is both close personally and professionally. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for all the great work that you guys are doing for all of us. So truly appreciate all the effort. I'm an immigrant. I'm originally from Pakistan. I came to the US for school and I've been here ever since. It's been a long time. So I identify as a Pakistani American and I practice Islam, yes.
What is Ramadan? What does it celebrate?
So I think I should definitely add that I am a scholar of race and migration, and I'm not a scholar of Islam. So whatever I say here is more personal and cultural to me. So I should add that as a warning caution. But I think for me, Ramadan has been a very important part of our lives, and as Muslims from across the world, regardless where you are, if you identify as a Muslim, or if you are somewhat associated with Islam, Ramadan means an important month. It's a month of celebration, and it's a month, because just to give you a little background, Islamic calendars are based on lunar calendars. So the months begin with the sight of when you see the moon. So it's basically, that's when you begin the calendars. It's a little different from the Gregorian calendars that we see. When we are talking about Ramadan, we're talking about both nostalgia and we're talking about a month that it has a lot of spiritual commitment for all Muslims. Because as you already know, it's a month of fasting where people, and Muslims specifically, fast from sunrise to sunset. And the whole, I think the whole ideology behind it is being away from material needs and trying to create your spiritual well-being. So that's the larger context. And I think there are multiple aspects and sides of it where staying away from food and not eating, but like just sort of staying away from these physicalities of the world so that you can ensure your spiritual well-being. And then, so the way this is done is that Muslims, they have like two large meals. One is a big breakfast, which is sahur or sahri, depending on Arabic or the language we're in, and sort of like starts right before sunrise. And people eat eggs and protein and make sure, and water and dates, and just want to make sure that they have enough nourishment in the body. And then they fast the whole day, depending on where you are located on the map, and when the sun rises and when the sun sets. And they open the fast with the simplest of meals, like water, salt, and dates. These are the popular norms of just, so you want to keep your tummy, ease your tummy into the food process. So that's like the larger snapshot, and people eat like throughout the evening, and there are prayers, and it's a lot of celebration and a lot of family time.
Yeah, and that's really, really cool to hear. And you mentioned that, Ramadan is based on the lunar calendar. So how long does Ramadan typically last?
So depending on the how do you, the longevity of the moon, I think you can say that it could be 29 or 30 days. So it depends on that. And right now, I think we're on 12th Ramadan, 2022. So I think we'll have the end primarily maybe by the 2nd of May. That's what they're expecting. But 29 to 30 days is the duration, and the fast is then divided based on the timing of where you're located on the map of the world.
Oh, that's so cool. So, where you are situated throughout the world will
Yes.
impact your fast. Very cool.
Yeah, the number of hours, if you're in Australia, like right now it's winter there, so it's a little different. If you're in the US right now, it's different here, but it just depends on where you are in South Asia or the Asian region. It's like getting warmer. So yeah, it just depends where you are. And fasting is for the healthy, because I think that's very important to add. People often forget that it is only for the people whose bodies are strong enough that they can endure fasting, because it's a lot of physical work. So if you are sick or unwell or have a medical condition or are pregnant or are old or anything, then you do not fast, but you can compensate by giving money or charity to somebody who is in need.
Yeah, I think that's something that folks, may have questions about. So I'm really glad you addressed that. And so what does a regular fast look like?
That's a great question. So the fast is divided into this four, which means an early morning breakfast before sunrise. And then you have the iftar, which is at sunset, which means that you basically eat because you haven't had food the whole day. So when you are with families or you live alone, or if you have a communal gathering, and people tend to have the evening a meal with each other, so it's like a socially network environment also, and people are sharing food with each other, and they open the fast basically with like easy stuff, water and dates and salt, and that helps just ease them into eating other food, rice and chicken and meat and protein, depending on what they like, and they can continue that. And then again by sunrise or dawn around 4 a.m. I think it's 3:45 right now currently, that people will close their fast. So they will eat up before, which can be different for different people depending on people's bodies. So some people just, drink a glass of water, and some people just eat some peanuts or dry fruit, or actually have a breakfast. It depends on different individuals and their body needs, but then you just basically fast from sunset to sunrise. And during that time, I think it's important to remember that it is staying away from physical needs. So needs that are more material in being. So not only food, but trying to make your spiritual well-being better. Like saying, being kind, being nice, like performing good. So I think that is the whole point of the whole fasting. That is not only food, but you're focusing on other parts of lives and being a better human to other people around you. Yeah.
And for you personally, like, what does Ramadan mean to you?
Oh, it's so nostalgic. I think I miss it. It's always a feeling of home, because it's celebrated in different ways, and there's a lot of family time, a lot of love, and you always wake up in the morning, and not everybody has the best morning feels, but the memories have been great growing up. So I think I definitely miss that. And the evenings in which when you open the fast and then you pray, and I miss that. I miss the culture. I miss the festivities, because the work days in Muslim majority countries are then designed according to the fast. So you don't have to work all day. You're primarily focused. Everybody understands people are tired. People are like, they're just like keeping a fast. So the culture is then different, and like the news is different. Everything then just feels more around, it revolves around Ramadan. And so I think in a lot of group prayers, so that like sets the tone, and helps keep everyone fast. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't mind sharing, like, what's one of your favorite just memories of celebrating Ramadan?
Oh, I loved so when I was growing up, we had all these this is really interesting. We had all these like funny these all these places like Pizza Hut and KFC, and it's interesting because I think in the part of the world where we come from, they're commemorated and they're like they have a different standing than they are here, as like not deplorable food, but it's like more of like, oh, it's a treat over there. So it's I think there are like different contrasts to the way of like how these transnational corporations function across the globe, for sure. But so they would do all these really interesting, fun deals, and you and your friends would just go out, and have celebrate and just enjoy and talk, and just have a good time socially, and just celebrating the month also. So I think it was interesting. It was like both spiritual, but also very communal. Because it's just, and this, because it's different. The structure of your life changes because you're waking up super early in the morning to eat, and then you're like going to bed at different times. So I think that sort of like having that communal bond helps everyone sort of get into the rhythm of Ramadan.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Like how, this is celebrating both, it's both spiritual, but it's also, about the larger community and really connecting with others as well.
There are
Um,
special prayers associated with this that people do after opening the fast, and I think that is part of like that makes it both religious, spiritual, and communal, and more social at the same time. And I think that sort of like generates, and it revives your practice. I don't know if that makes sense. And I think similar to what the Easter feels are, and so I think it's like that, yeah.
in what ways do you think that the pandemic has impacted the celebration of Ramadan? This could either be like you personally or, from what you've heard from family and friends. But, has the pandemic impacted how folks celebrate and, what does that look like?
Definitely it has, because we definitely have a lot of communal iftars in the Boston area. I should definitely add that in terms of, because there are so many schools and institutions here. So MIT, Harvard, BU, Boston College, even if you don't, but like people do come together. And there's the Islamic ISBC Center right here. And so there are fasts that happen, like there are like all these iftars that happen. The iftar is the terminology you use when you open the fast. So there are a lot of these iftars that take place in the evenings, and they're very communal. So that has always helped in terms of opening up in the communal part of it. But when the pandemic hit, I think that was integral. Like all these communal rituals just stopped. And also like the Friday prayers are so important, and going to the mosque pretty much stopped. And after the end of Ramadan, we have Eid, which is celebrated by a prayer in the morning. And then people get together and very much exchange food and eat together, and like it's the end of Ramadan, so they're like basically celebrate with a lot of food. And that sort of stopped. So people were only meeting families that were very immediately close to them, or if they were safe. But I think that really, like other festivities, the pandemic halted in terms of the communal gatherings around it because of safety issues. And I think people are very excited that they're going to be able to do this now, and they are doing this now. So it's nice to sort of feel that community again within the area, for sure.
Yeah, I would say the pandemic has hit everyone, and especially for folks who, are parts of various communities, and then you go from like having that community space to no longer having it. It's really difficult. Um, I think now we're going to transition a little bit away from Ramadan and kind of more broadly about kind of your own personal experiences um, in the US. And I know that, we aren't going to go into a ton of this now or today, but, kind of post 9/11, I think, we have seen a rise in, kind of anti-Muslim rhetoric, you know, just kind of like general increase in violence against Muslims in the US. Um, and there's a lot of really great literature and scholarship out there about what what has happened since 9/11. But we also know that this hasn't gone away. And I think, especially under, former President Trump, there was kind of an uptick both, in violence against Muslim communities, violence against Asian communities. So this was something that we've seen kind of boil up again. It's never really gone away, but it's kind of resurfaced in various ways. So what has your experience been like in the US as someone who practices Islam? And also, coming from an immigrant background, how has that also impacted your own experience here in the US?
That's a great question. And I think, as you all know, like post 9/11 has been integral in what it did was it highlighted the Muslim immigrant identity. And Muslim immigrants have lived in the United States since the time of slavery, pretty much. African slaves were the first Muslims that came to the US. And then post 1965 Immigration Act that was passed enabled more non-white immigrants, and Muslims were part of the waves that came in, and they established mosques and established their cultural centers in the US. So there's always been this prevalence that have been parallel to the American context and very integrated in terms of the economic labor markets and other aspects of the American mainstream. And what 9/11 did was it just identified this Muslim identity specifically under the context of war on terror and extremist Islam, which all the Muslims, of course, have been like they do not identify with. So it became problematic, where the Muslim experience then just became problematic. And because the US is a racialized society, so race and ethnicity and religion have always been crucial in terms of how othering has taken place. And we've seen that with Jewish immigrants, we saw that with Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants, different categories. And so the Muslims, again, also experienced something very similar, but more legitimized in terms of the acts that were set in place. And I think what's happened is that over time, specifically with the travel bans, the rhetoric became extremely anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant. So along with Muslim populations like Mexican immigrants and other non-white minorities felt the uprising hate crimes against their ethno-racial identities. So that has been, I think, unfortunate and for a lot of immigrants from different parts of these non-white communities living in the US and dealing with everyday parts of their lives. And I think they have navigated this, and I see this in my own research. We're always like challenging these ideas, taking the platforms. Interfaith sources have been very beneficial, specifically the Abrahamic faiths, Catholicism, churches, Judaism. They've always been been part of this, and each of these communities have helped each other out in creating these liaisons, protecting themselves and others. I think that has been crucial, but I think Muslims for sure, Muslim Americans, Muslim immigrants have become more cautious and have become more politically active in situating their rights to protect themselves and their families and their children in school from these hate crimes.
Yeah. And I, will say I formerly, was a historian focusing on citizenship and immigration of, Asian immigrants to the US. So I feel like there's just so many commonalities and kind of similarities between, again, kind of racism and, you know, kind of just hate in general in this country, which is kind of a dark history of this country that's still,
It's
we haven't
there.
solved this problem.
I mean, COVID-19, all of a sudden you saw a rise in anti-Asian sentiment and hate crimes against Asian Americans and Asians. And so it's always politically charged, and it's unfortunate that then the non-white minorities that are being discussed are immediately subjected to these unfortunate incidents, and it does drastically impact their life in horrendous ways, because mental health issues are not discussed in these communities. And so that is something that they are dealing with, and they're always trying to challenge these stereotypes, these negative stereotypes around their identities.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great segue into our next question, which are what are some of the common um, misperceptions or stereotypes of Muslims in the US? And I think this may even speak a little bit to your own personal research. So, yeah.
All of this talks to my research. I appreciate this. I think if you watch Hollywood films, they represent these extremist identities, often with Islam, and that is something pretty much what Muslim men and women have to deal with. So, for example, the beard, religious markers like the beard and the hijab and the scarf and the veils have become problematic notions that are associated with the Muslim identity, and people are more likely to be subjected to hate crimes if they're, if they are visually apparent in them. And also, I think what is interesting is how immigration systems, specifically at the airport, the surveillance at TSA takes place and who's, randomly selected. That is always interesting in terms of what they look like, what's their name. As I said, I think the political rhetoric around the war on terror and the recent Muslim bans, travel bans, they've sort of created this demonized Muslim identity that has been criminalized in ways culturally, politically, and religiously. So Muslims have become targets to different realms of hate crimes in different parts of their lives.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important for folks to also recognize that, you know, folks who are Muslim like do not share just one single like racial or ethnic identity. And so like I think that's something also for folks to realize is that, you can be East Asian and Muslim and like you can be
Very right.
yeah.
Yes. It's such a complex identity ethno-racially. So that's why religion became the pronounced identity here, because ethno-racially it's white, brown, black. And so that like makes it, ethno-racially ambiguous and hard to identify what a Muslim can look like. So, these very typical stereotypes of like beards and scarves have often been used as signifiers and symbolic to represent Muslim identities. But you're very right. It's a very diverse, Muslims are of diverse origin. And also there are a lot of American, I want to say that they're Muslim Americans that both are white and black and brown. And as I mentioned, but they're also Muslim American converts in this category. So it is a diverse, a diverse group of individuals, and they practice Islam in diverse ways because so I think that multiplicity of the culture is integral in what Muslims and who Muslims are. And it's interesting, it seems alien to the American culture when it's not, when it's just pretty much embedded and part of the workforce and part of the, they're part of different realms of their lives. But the identities have just been demonized in ways that appear to be separate from the larger American context.
Yeah, and just kind of just a final question, in thinking about the workplace, what are some changes you personally would love to see in, kind of American workplaces that would allow for, Muslim Americans to feel either more safe or be able to, like practice Islam easier?
I think that's a great question. I think it's as a professor at a university and having gone to school to the US, and I think the important part is that there are places to pray on campus so people can perform their prayers as they want. And I think there are a lot of cultural and Islamic centers or mosques that always help with that. But I think it is important to be aware of when people are fasting, because your students learn differently. they're learning, it's different. They're tired. So I think some sort of way of ensuring that departments are aware of, that we try to here, and we are aware at UMassel that students are fasting. So just being concerned with their mental health and their physical well-being. But I think having that part of like the larger discourse would definitely help students. And I think having access to dining halls in the early morning, which I think is very difficult, and in the evenings also, because sometimes the dining halls get closed. So I think some assistance for them, just acknowledgement would, I think, definitely help.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm definitely going to keep those, in my own pocket to use in the future because I do think that, some of workplaces are really good about providing prayer space, but that may be something that not all of our locals here in the region or even throughout the UAW have really kind of thought about. And I think, what we're hoping to do here, both with, speaking with you today and kind of just generally is really taking a look and be like, what can we do more in the workplace? And this is just the start, and I'm really appreciative of the time you've taken today.
No problem at all. And I honestly don't know the dining hall hours here, but this is a conversation that I was having with my colleague earlier. Like, if people have access to food during this time, like specifically Muslim students, because I think it's interesting. As older adults, you get used to it and you're used to cooking, and you are independent, you're living an independent life. But when you're an 18 or 19-year-old living away from home, that is difficult. So whether you're a Muslim American or whether you're an international student from any part of the world, it's just part of, I think that is then just becomes difficult. So yeah, I hope that campuses enable that and acknowledge that.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you again so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope that others will enjoy it and learn a bit more. And, I think that this is just the start of this, and maybe we'll see you again in the future. But anything else that you just want to say and let folks know about?
No, thank you so much for having me here and giving me the opportunity to share my experiences. I just want to say that I think one more thing, it's Ramadan is a month of peace and joy for Muslims. So I think they wait for it the whole year. Even if you're not fasting or you're fasting, the whole environment and the whole idea is to sort of like enable your body and your mind and your soul into the process of peace and sort of creating that and hoping to enjoy or valuing the little joys that we have in a very traumatic world that we live in. So I think that's what Ramadan tries to help us remind. So, and we celebrate it. Muslims, you can't, Muslims celebrate it at the end. It's like Christmas and people dress up and have parties. So I think there's a lot of happy and joyous stuff associated and a lot of celebrations and colors involved that are part of the festivities around Ramadan and how Ramadan ends.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I just wish you the best while you continue your celebration. And we will, I'm sure talk again soon.
Thank you.